Today I'm joined by a very special guest. He is a writer, producer, and actor. His writing credits on The Shield include the episodes Blowback, Dragon Chasers, Dead Soldiers, Mum, Judas Priest, all that we gave A's. He is the creator of Sons of Anarchy, Bastard Executioner, and the co-creator of Mayans MC. Kurt Sutter joins me on the Shattered Shield today. How you doing, Kurt?
I'm good, man. Thank you. Thank you for including me.
Of course, of course. I've got some questions today about really season 5 of The Shield. That's where we are in the podcast, as well as your writing process. But I like to ask my guests, as a tradition, how they got involved with The Shield. So how did you first get started? How did you hear about the show? And what is your origin story there?
My origin story, I started out, writing features. I always loved, I grew up in front of a TV, and I started writing TV specs. And I just really took to the format of it, like that 5-act structure. Like I intuitively sort of knew how to do it. Like it really sort of dovetailed into the way I tell stories. And so I did what writers did at that point in time, which was you write a spec script of another show and you send that out, and or if you have an original pilot, you send that out. And I think I had written a totally unproducible West Wing episode,
Yeah.
where literally it was like a 7-year-old shot another 7-year-old on a playground. It was
Oh, wow. Okay.
and I think that's what Sean read and brought me in. And don't forget, FX wasn't really a network of any note at that point. It was reruns and a couple comedies. And I was and I tried to staff the season before, and I got close on a couple things, and then I met with Sean, late Scott Brazil. I remember two things about the interview. The first thing I remember is I went to shake Sean's hand. He had a really bad sinus infection. Didn't shake my hand, right? And I thought, all right, that's a good start. And as obviously, out of respect for me, not to get me sick, and but
Sure.
But it was just sort of like, all right. And then what I remember is the last question he asked. He basically said, without putting all humility or whatever aside, tell me, why you're a great writer or what you do great. And I do remember telling him that I had the capacity to write. I understood and knew how to write really fucked up people.
Right.
And that was the interview, and then didn't hear much for a while, because I think what had happened was FX was, that was they were launching their first drama, and it was between, and you probably know all this, obviously, it was between The Shield and I think a show called Dope. And it was either one or the other, and they didn't know which way they were going to go. So that had gone on, and then I think I had gotten, at that point, there was an offer on the table for some anthology show, and then The Shield, and then FX decided on The Shield, and then that all happened very quick. I guess Sean already sort of knew, kind of sense of who the staff was, and but he couldn't lock down writers until he knew it was a go, and so then the process was very quick, and they made the offer as a staff writer, and that's how that's how I came into the staff. But it's interesting. I always tell this story because I was really, in a really good way, I was very naive about the whole process of, obviously, not only getting that job, but of being in a writer's room. I was sort of, I don't really like people. I hadn't, I didn't work well with others, and so being in a collaborative environment like that was brand new to me, and also the politics of it all, right? A lot of people who are writers,
Sure.
who want to be writers, they come up through that process. There are PAs and assistants, and so there's a hierarchy and an understanding of how it works, and I had no idea how it all worked, and which ultimately I think worked, to my benefit, because I just sort of allowed me to kind of be who I was, and I always give Scott Rosenbaum, Skeeter. I always give him shit about this because we were the two staff writers that were hired on the show, and Skeeter had worked on another show before, and he often knew that, if a show hires two staff writers, a lot of times they'll only pick up and keep one of those writers. It's
Yeah.
a competitive thing. And I had no fucking idea how that worked. I signed a thing for 7 years, and I was so naive. I was like, oh, wow, if it's on the air, I got a gig for 7 years, not realizing that my option had to be picked up every year, right? And I just remember Skeeter was so fucking competitive those first, and I was like, wow, what's up with this fucking guy? Like, I like,
Yeah.
like, why is he so and I was just like excited to have the gig, and he was,
Sure.
and I was like, wow, this is weird, and then I remember like being called in the season. And being later on in the season, being called into Sean's office and telling me that he was picking up my option for season 2, and I was like, "What?"
What? That's funny.
But I think all that worked in my favor because I was sort of naively fearless. But that's how I got into the room.
So I actually got the distinct pleasure, I'll say, to watch this when it was airing, and I started to recognize your episodes in specific because they were Dead Soldiers, where they burned Armadillo's face, and Mum, where Aceveda was assaulted, and Slipknot's another one that comes to mind with a lynching. They're just very visceral, painful episodes. This doesn't have to be S.H.I.E.L.D. specific. This could even go to Sons or any other shows. But did you ever have a time where you were flat out told no, you weren't allowed to put something on one of those shows, and you really, really felt strongly about it?
Look, there's always, some sense of being aware of what's watchable and what's not, what's going to turn
Sure.
people the wrong way. And obviously we had standards and practices, but FX at the time, Landgraf got there, I don't know, season 3 or 4 or something, but before it was Riley and Kevin, he wanted the show to push those boundaries, and so a lot of the stuff that was really visceral or violent, a lot of it was, it was toned in a way that it was shot in a way to make it work. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that we, if things, if a lot of things didn't get shut down so much as, okay, that's really cool, but how do we do this, in a way that makes it, palatable to a certain extent. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, there were things that I got a lot of pushback on and fought for, and some I won, some I didn't.
You don't think anything was ever in specific that really lessened the show, in your opinion? Was it just stuff that you think in the long run was better off?
No, look, especially on the Shield, right? Because I was green, and I think Sean could take those ideas and shape them in a way he knew would be right for the show, and then again, a lot of it was tonal issues with the director and S&P and all that stuff. I do remember there was a season. Well, what was Glenn Close? Season 4.
That was season 4, yeah.
Yeah. I had a line. It was towards the end of the episode in this season, and I love Glenn Close. She was so cool to work with, and watching, and watch her transition into that genre that she really had never done before. And at first we were a show. There wasn't a lot of take 4 and take 5 on the Shield, and that took her a minute to wrap. She was used to finding the performance and initially being sort of, shocked by that or boxed in by that. But then, the artist that she is, she quickly understood the power of it and making those choices faster and trusting those choices. And, and she totally got how it shifted the energy of a character. It shifted the energy of a show. It shifted the rhythm. And it really, as an artist, she was like, oh my God, this is so fucking cool, instead of, oh my, so
right.
she was so much fun to work with. But I did have a line in one of the later episodes, and where she was talking to Anthony Anderson's character, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but it was something like
Sure.
she was threatening his son, and basically she was saying, he's going to end up with a back full of shiv and an ass full of cum, right?
Yeah.
Was the line. And as she was in the read through, I guess she hadn't read the new draft, and in the read through, she's reading the line. She goes, and a back full of shiv and an ass full, and she stops and she goes, "Oh, I'm not going to say this."
That's
like
great.
loud, and the whole room was quiet. Everyone was looking at me. I'm like, okay. So then we gave the line to Walton.
Yeah. I remembered that line. That's great. I've never heard that before. Interesting.
But so there were moments like that sometimes where we had to
Yeah.
manipulate stuff. But I don't think there was ever anything that I felt got shut down that somehow compromised the integrity of the show.
Okay. This season, actually, season 5, is pretty burned into fans' minds because of the death of Lem.
Mm-hmm.
And I just talked to Sean about his threshold for eliminating a character, which he said was really high. Now, I'm also a major fan of Sons of Anarchy. I watched that because I was watching The Shield, and then I think they aired the pilot of Sons like right after the end of The Shield, I think, or in tandem, somewhere close.
We did it in tandem. My understanding was initially I thought the season would end and then the season of Sons would begin because I did.
Yeah.
I season 7 on The Shield, instead of taking a money bump, I took a time bump. So Sean freed me up so I could work on Sons. And then when they decided to air it, to use The Shield to launch Sons, so The Shield, aired on Tuesday, and then Sons aired on Wednesday. That last season of The Shield. So that was kind of crazy. But
I can imagine, yeah.
So anyhow, so the threshold for character.
Yeah. Did you have what was your justifiable reason? Like, what did you need to have in order to take out a character when you were in control? Just curious if you had a different bar.
Look, I think there's different circumstances where that happens. Look, sometimes it's you'll have an actor that decides they don't want to be on the show anymore, or there'll be a contractual thing, and especially if it's not a major character who's a series regular and you don't have them locked down and stuff like that. When Taylor Sheridan, who now is like the fucking A-list writer and director and has an amazing fucking career, he was an unhappy actor. Like, he was a dude who knew that in retrospect, I can say this. He was a dude who knew that, he could be doing so much more. And, he really struggled with the idea of the fact that he was on screen as much as some of the other actors, but not making as much money, and look, in TV, and there's Q, higher, there's, the money is based on a lot of different factors. And to give people, to upgrade people financially, if you do it with one person, then somebody's agent finds out, and then then everybody that's at that level, more often than not will want that same bump. So it's a really complicated process in terms of, upping somebody's level on the show in terms of salary or being a series regular. And I completely understood his argument, and it made sense. But my hands were tied, right? I couldn't change, that protocol. I couldn't, and he was just really unhappy. I've learned that, when you have somebody on the show that doesn't want to be there, it's fucking, they're unhappy. They make other people get that vibe. It's just poison, right? And at that point, when Taylor wanted to move on, that's when we made a decision. And ultimately, right, it's when I really was able to incorporate Unser, who was really almost an afterthought kind of character. But we had such a great actor who had such a great rapport with the rest of the cast that it's really when I was able to take Dayton and really make him the almost the linchpin of the show,
Yeah.
and that only happened because of Taylor wanting to move on and us sort of having to figure out how we do that now. And at the time, it was really uncomfortable for Taylor and myself and everyone else. But you take a step back now and you go, yeah, I'm pretty sure that was supposed to happen. You know what I mean?
Right.
You have those kind of reasons. In terms of getting rid of a character, based on story, based on relationship. Yeah, Sean's right. You have to really. It's a big decision, and it can't be done arbitrarily. You have to, not only because of the fan base, and how people love the character, and you really have to earn it, so that yes, people are upset by it, but in the course of the mythology, you can see it as one of those things that, oh fuck yeah, that had to happen.
Right.
And with the strike team, that had to happen, right? There had to be, they earned that loss,
Yeah.
And the reason we chose Lem was because that was the character. If he went away, that's the one that was going to break your heart, right?
Right.
And if you're going to do it, then fucking let's break people's hearts. For me to draw the comparison on obviously on Sons, it was Opie, right?
Yep.
We had reached a point in that character where so much had happened to this cat in terms of his wife and his dad and not being in the club, and I reached a point where I realized I couldn't have that dude. I couldn't have Opie sitting at that table anymore, right? That didn't make sense. And I didn't want to have some character who was like a satellite and not in the club and still I didn't know how to do it. And that's when I realized oh, this is the Horatio, this is the moment that this is the thing that impacts my hero, in a way that spins him into the last 2 or 3 seasons of the show, right? This is the event. And it was a difficult choice. We tried to make it as visceral and as heartbreaking, but, as powerful as we could, the same way we did with Lem,
and it worked because Laying Pipe is the only episode name that I can remember from Sons for that reason. It's just that traumatizing.
Yeah, it can never be an arbitrary decision, and look, it's something you really, to a network especially that knows what the fan base is. They don't want to turn on, you have to justify it and earn it. For everyone, you have to prove to everyone that this is the right decision.
You've been in a few writing rooms at this point. What's the most effective one that you've been a part of, and what made it successful? What about its process made it so successful in your mind?
Hands down, The Shield is the best writer's room I've ever been in, and the most effective writer's room. And that's because Sean is a way better showrunner than I am. And the only other writing rooms I've been in are the ones that I was running. It's funny. I had lunch with Mazzara about a few weeks ago, a month ago or so, and we were talking about this. It's it was just sort of the right mix of people. The show was sort of off the grid enough. There was no you know what I mean? It was just
right,
sort of
yeah.
It was the right time and the right chemistry and the right people, and and there was really good push and pull. Like I said, I was really naive about the process, so I was wholly arrogant and proprietary, way more than anybody should be in a room but the showrunner, especially not a fucking staff writer, right? And so. And as that energy developed, you sort of create that push and pull, and
right.
And we had people like Glenn would really fight for shit, and I would really fight for shit, and we'd get into arguments, and we'd, and it would get heated, right? And not in a in a nasty way, in a creative way, right? And
Right.
from that heat, you always like the best idea, you know, uh, always happened, right? It's funny
Yeah.
times, in my writers' room, I would hire writers, and everyone was so fucking nice to each other, and like,
You
oh, that's a really
disappointed?
good, that's really, and I literally would try to start fights just to like shit with sometimes,
Yeah.
because I just, to set that fuse a little bit and to light that.
Sure.
But yeah, I would say hands down the Shield, and that's because of Sean.
I had originally planned on attaching this audio to the episode of Mice and Lem because I have a specific scene stuck in my mind. It's the one that Forrest Whitaker did as John Kavanaugh, where he just loses his mind on the chief.
Hmm.
And he's talking about how Vic Mackey's pissing on everybody. And I was curious, you're credited for that episode, but I think Charles Egley is as well. So I was wondering if you remember, just for my own personal satisfaction, who wrote that in specific so that I could thank them.
Here's what I would say. I would say that I don't remember what scenes or how that episode was broken down in terms of writing. My guess is that either Chick or myself did a pass on that, but
Yeah.
I think Sean like saw that, like that whole season was based on that scene, I think, in a lot of ways. So I think
Yeah.
Sean had that dialogue and that scene in his head for a really long time. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
guess is that that final pass that Sean wrote was probably, you know, mostly his.
Okay.
And and I don't say that to be, I don't remember, but I do know that, um, uh, like that final scene where those two guys literally fucking crash into each other, like Sean had seen that scene in his head early on, and was writing towards
Yeah.
it. So my sense is that he probably, did the lion's share of that speech.
Okay.
And if I'm wrong, I'm really sorry, Chick. But no, it was a crazy season, and I remember I pitched that character of Kavanaugh, and we were discussing actors, and I think I had met Forrest, or I had a conversation with Forrest about another a movie I had done. So I actually had the first meeting with Forrest. I met him at the 101 Diner to talk about the character, and and Forrest is, really such a great actor, really lovely
Yeah.
man, and really so like I just remember the whole conversation was about samurai, right? So
That's funny.
it was sort of like I was like, oh, cool, he's this guy, right? Like he's
Yeah. Yeah.
coming from it underneath, and that's really what he brought, that sort of slow, simmering, righteousness to that character, and and eventually, the sword came out. But yeah, that was a crazy fight season.
I think another thing that sticks out to me, in particular with your episodes, is you had really good. I don't know if you made these choices. This is really what the question is about. It's about the music in your episodes. Disarm by Smashing Pumpkins is in Of Mice and Lem, which really adds a lot of weight to the scene of Lem leaving. There's a lot of good music in Sons of Anarchy. So what was the process like for choosing music on the show? I asked Mazzara, and he said he really didn't care about it, but he thought that you were more particular with it.
Yeah, I love music. It really informs. Look, there's a balance, right? You don't ever want music to compensate for a scene, in any way, whether it's a needle drop or a score or whatever. But if you can find the right piece of music or the right composition to float the narrative on and to enhance it, right? I think it can be really powerful. And I most, I love I love the use of music. So mostly every one of my fucking episodes had a music montage, much to production and budget dismay.
Yeah.
But Sean was very generous with that. I think he had a sense that I was making choices for the right reasons, and he chose a Smashing Pumpkins song. I did not.
Okay.
I thought it was too contemporary and too, because not too contemporary, too current. Like a lot of the songs
Okay.
we chose were not, but that was his choice, and obviously I was wrong because it was fucking perfect. And but I had chose, I would put these songs in and I would make choices, and I would say probably maybe 60-70% of the time if we could afford the song, we would use it. I had used a
Yeah.
couple of Flogging Molly songs.
Mm-hmm.
I had used a couple of Steve Earle songs. I really put time and energy into making those choices. They weren't like arbitrary, like, oh, this would be cool. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it shows.
And I think he noticed that as well. So I actually was able to get again, like if we if we could afford it, quite a few songs in there.
In retrospective, now that you can separate yourself from the material, it's been a while. Do you think there was a character on the show that was a good conduit for your writing style? Do you think there was one you liked writing more so than others?
I read that question earlier. And thought about it. Probably, I think I had a pretty good sense of Vic.
Yeah.
Like I understood that sort of coping mechanism.
Uh-huh.
And Lem as well. I think I had a really good sense of the, that sense of Lem of like,
Can't we ever do what we're supposed to do and then stop?
why can't we all just get along? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like nobody wrote Dutch and Claudette better than fucking Sean. Like Sean could channel Dutch, and but I would think it would probably be Vic and in the strike team.
Okay.
I loved writing Dutch and Claudette stuff as well, but I think like Sean just
Yeah.
channeled Jay.
Blowback is my personal favorite episode that you wrote. That, of course, introduces us to Margos Desarian, who was nicknamed Cocaine Jesus by my co-host, affectionately. It's one of his favorite characters, by the way. He's going to the show for the first time with us. Was there a favorite script that you had that you really thought was a solid episode on that show that you just remember? Like it's your go-to when you think about what you did there?
Right. It's a good question. I and I don't mean this to sound arrogant, but it's like you sort of love all your babies. Do you know what I mean? So it's hard to to make that decision. I will say that Blowback for me was probably the episode that really allowed me to tether myself to the show, and my naivete served me because I remember I wrote a script, and most Shield episodes were, I don't know, 52, maybe 54 pages, something like that, and we still ended up always cutting a ton of shit in post, but I think I turned in like a 62-page draft, my first draft, which happens, and Sean gave me a bunch of notes and cuts and stuff like that, and I took his notes and I took the cuts, but then I just remember the cuts that he made I thought were really good, and the changes, but then I looked at it in its entirety, and I was like, oh, okay, if we change this, then we need this scene, or oh, that's really great because now he has this reaction, so this should happen, right? So
Right.
I took his notes and then turned in a second draft that was 69 pages.
That's
Right?
great.
And I remember Sean
Yeah.
getting it, going, "Wait a minute, what?" And
Going the wrong way.
like I was, because I was totally, I was like, "Oh, okay, here you go," and look, and Sean read that script, and but realized that what I did and the changes that I made and the additional scenes that I wrote, you know, were good, right?
Yeah.
And were based on the fact that I knew the story, I knew the characters, and you know, and then he of course took that script and got it down to a producible size.
Yeah.
But there was a 69-page draft of that first script, and and yes, I had been an actor. My intention was never to be an actor in while I was on the Shield, but that was all Clark Johnson, who had directed the pilot and directed that episode. And for some reason, thought I should be Margot's, and I went in and I read, and the rest is cocaine Jesus history.
You did great, by the way. You had some of the best deadpan looks of all time. So, what would you say is your biggest takeaway from working on the Shield?
Oh wow. Look, the Shield really allowed me to develop my voice. Like to hone it and to craft it in a way that ultimately I understood who I was as a writer, and that only happened because of Sean Ryan. Sean
Yeah.
uh, Sean saw who I was. He saw my strengths. He saw my weaknesses, and he just put up the right bumpers that allowed me to service the show and also service myself as an artist and find my way. And I'll be honest with you, uh, I don't know how many. In fact, I do know there wouldn't have been a lot of other showrunners that would have been able to do that. I think
Yeah.
I think I would have intimidated other people, or I think I would have, you know, um, uh, bugged other people. So, either way, I think if it was anybody else, um, I would not have been given the opportunity that I was there to figure out who I was as a writer. And it's why I
Yeah.
did 7 seasons, because you know, I Skeeter and Julian, everyone started sort of making lateral moves and to further their career and blah blah blah. And I loved what I was doing on that show so much, and I didn't give a fuck about my career, and because I was a starving artist for 40 fucking years before I got that job, and
Right.
so I didn't give a shit about that. Like I just wanted to keep doing what I was doing, and every time I would look at other shows that I could potentially go to and write, I would be like, no, that's right, So,
Yeah.
and look, and obviously it was the right decision in terms of learning how to then run a show and move forward from there. But no, I say this publicly all the time, and to Sean as well. Like I know I would not have the career that I have, if any, if if that circumstance didn't happen. If he wasn't the dude, and running
Sure.
that show, that understood me and understood sort of how to point me in the right direction so I didn't hurt myself or others.
We have, speaking of going from, writer to showrunner, we do have a lot of people who are aspiring writers that write in, and you've been one of the most requested guests for that. So I was wondering if you could maybe offer a little bit of insight into what it's like to transition from writer to showrunner, like what people might expect when they do something like that, expectations, versus reality, that kind of deal.
Um, Look, I think it'll be, obviously it's different for everyone. Sean really, Sean was also like a mathematician. Like he was a Actually, that's one of his jobs he had before he was a full-time writer. He was a math tutor, and he could see the story in his mind, kind of savant-like, and on the board, and in a way that I never could, right? Like I could break a story and have my, with my writers and put it up on the board. But I couldn't find the episode until I was inside of it, right?
Yeah.
Until I hear the characters talking in my head, I'm not quite sure where it's all going. And, and that's my process. Unfortunately, it's a process that requires usually a page one rewrite on every fucking script I get. And that's not what I want to do, but that's how I find the episode. And that was my process that was very different than Sean's, right? So everyone is going to bring their own different strengths and weaknesses and challenges to the job. The practical part of it, I came in and, the network had put a showrunner with me, who had some experience, but he was a lovely guy, but he was like on fucking Grey's Anatomy or something. It was just having marches, and
Yeah.
and it didn't really make sense, and it didn't fit, and I, by the third or fourth episode, I was sort of doing what I was doing anyhow, and then they sort of let me do what they just started to trust and let me do what I was doing, and yeah, look, there was definitely bumps in the road. It took a while to acquire, some collaboration skills with studio and network, and a couple of, hostile work environment claims, and, not many people probably send emails telling the president of their network to go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
Nor do they inspire the kind of response where the then president responds by telling me to go fuck myself, So I tend to bring that out in people. But look, it was a learning process for me, and I think by the time I had brought in Paris Barkley by season 3, I had figured out, I'd found the groove. I knew who to lean on, how to lean on people. I had developed a working relationship with the studio network where they got me and I got them. And, and after that, it sort of became, and look, I had, the more you do it, the more confidence you have and the less fear you have. And, in my case, the less, acting out happens when I'm not fearful,
Yeah.
So I think time is an experience is the thing that eventually, makes it all work. But I think the transition is really, it's going to be different for everybody. It really depends what people's different strengths are, Some people have no management skills, no administrative skills, and can't figure out like a fucking calendar in terms of delivering scripts, and like people have strength, and and the trick is finding what your strengths are and what your challenges are, and then finding the right people to sort of fill in those gaps, and that takes a minute,
if you've got time, I've got a couple of quick conspiracy questions for you. I don't know if you'd like to answer.
Sure.
For a long time, I've noticed that when Kenny Johnson gets blown to bits in Sons, Kozik is the character he's playing.
Yes.
His last line is, "You got to be shitting me," and then he blows up. Now, of course, we know that Lem eats a grenade in The Shield. But was that "you got to be shitting me" a tribute to Dutch's line in Blowback?
Absolutely.
Yes, I knew it. I asked Jay Carnes and he didn't think so, but I just knew it in the back of my mind it had to be true.
Absolutely. I've put that line, I've given every one of my characters that line at some point in an homage to Dutch.
Thank God. It's fine. The mystery's been solved. The only other question I got for conspiracies is the ass invader joke in Bottom Bitch. We had a debate about that on that podcast episode we did. My co-host Libby thinks that was you. She said it's got your name written all over it. Do you remember that joke? Was that you who wrote that in there?
What
Do you
episode
remember
was?
that at all?
What episode was it?
That was that was Bottom Bitch,
I was
and what happened
was
was
that
a
Skeeter
school
wrote?
administrator.
Who's
I'm sorry.
who wrote that? Wasn't it Scott Rosenbaum?
Yeah, Scott Rosenbaum wrote that. Yeah,
Yeah.
but from what I understand, you guys had like a collaborative effort when you wrote episodes, so you may have contributed that line of dialogue. So I don't know if that was you or not.
And again, I don't remember, so hopefully I'm not crediting the wrong person. But that joke has Skeeter written all over it. So or possibly Sean,
Yeah.
Sean had some really fucking funny one-liners. So my guess is that it was either Skeeter or Sean.
Okay.
But I don't think that I can take credit for that one.
All right. Last question I got for you, Kurt. I saw a Twitter post that you posted talking about you having something with Harleys in your future. I don't know if you're able to elaborate on that, but what is next for you? What are your future plans? Where does Kurt Sutter go from here?
What's going on? Look, I'm sort of regrouping, obviously, based on what's gone down in the
Yeah.
last handful of months. I've been trying to get a project off the ground that's a bit of a reality-based thing.
Okay.
That did involve potential touring with Harleys, and that's all sort of up in the air. Here's what I'll tell you. Look, everything that's gone down in the last 3 or 4 months went down because it had to go down.
Yeah, sure.
By circumstances created by me, and and the changes that were happening, obviously, at the network and the studio. But the promise I made to myself was that the next thing I do, or the next deal I make or whatever, that it was going to be based on something that I wrote. Meaning,
Yeah.
I go in and run in and just take a deal somewhere to say, fuck you, I'm here. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
I didn't want to find myself in the same place I found myself, with Mayans, which is, do I really want to be here, right? So
Yeah.
the promise I made was that I'm gonna write something that I am excited about, that I love, and so that if I do hook up someplace else, that it would be based on something I've written, not just who I am or what I've done. So
Sure.
I'll share that much.
I'll be looking forward to it, man. I'm really appreciating you coming on here and doing this. I know it's been a while since this show's been on, but you were the last writer linchpin that we needed to complete the original writers room. So now we've gotten to have everybody on the show.
That's so great.
You are Sutter Inc. Excuse me, at Sutter Inc. on Twitter. Is there anything else that you want to talk about while you're here that we've got you?
I think that's it, man. You've exhausted me, and what little memory I have. But
Yeah.
no, I really appreciate you including me, and
Oh, no problem.
it's so great to honor that show and perhaps engage people who have never seen it to maybe take a look. So I appreciate it.
We really appreciate you coming on, Kurt. Thank you.